myself, and I want to welcome everyone here to Crossroads annual meeting for our partners. I am not Sally Lane, as the slide says. Sally, unfortunately, had a slight illness, nothing serious, but she could not be with us this morning. I am Patrick Murray. I am on the board of trustees of Crossroads of the American Revolution Association. I have been on and off affiliated with Crossroads since 2008. So I'll be taking the meeting today and guiding you through some of the things that we've done. Now, we're going to talk about what Crossroads has done over the past year, but most of the meeting today is going to be dedicated to two speakers who know a lot more than I do, or indeed most of us, on about the impact that heritage tourism can play here in New Jersey, particularly in the lead up to the United States 250th anniversary. And it's, you know, an opportunity here to take a look at that along with what we've accomplished and the groundwork that we've tried to lay leading up to that. So we can go to the next slide, Amy. So at Crossroads, again, our mission is connecting the people and places of New Jersey's rich revolutionary heritage to inspire community pride, stewardship, and civic engagement. The association is the designated management entity for New Jersey's only national heritage area. There are 57 national heritage areas in the country. They are affiliates of the National Park Service, but they are not national parks themselves. Our Crossroads National Heritage Area is the only one to date that was created around the contribution that the area made to the American Revolution and the founding of our country. That's going to change soon because the South Carolina National Heritage Area, dedicated to the Southern campaign of the Revolutionary War, will be coming online soon. So there'll be two of us, but of the 57 so far that are dedicated to a whole host of things. You know, New Jersey was recognized back in 2006 by an act of Congress because our contribution was so complex and so unique that it was of national importance to recognize. We receive federal funding through the National Park Service to support both operations and programs, what we do, and we supplement that with funding from grants and some state support that we have in terms of planning for the 250th coming up. Next slides. All right, so today's agenda is we'll go through some highlights of our past year, and then we'll talk about what we're doing to prepare for 2026. And it's not just 2026, it's actually the entire commemoration period within which in New Jersey, if we're commemorating everything that happened in New Jersey of importance, we're talking from 2024 to 2033. And we are planning for that entire period. So we'll be hearing from Cheryl Hargrove, a tourism expert on that, who's been consulting with us all along, as well as Jeff Vasser about the importance of heritage tourism here in New Jersey. And then we'll open it up to questions and answers. So let's start with some highlights here for Crossroads over the past year. Our big product this year, big project and product, because it is something that we're looking at in terms of bringing people into the state, is our audio tours program. We launched our inaugural tour, which covers the 10 Crucial Days period. We have 3 tours in development, although we say 3 tours, actually, as we're planning them out, that's 5 different routes that we're doing. So by this time next year, we should have a total of 6, at least 6 routes up and running. We have 218 heritage partners so far. And the other thing that we'll talk about is getting our brand out there, the Signage brand, so that we have a cohesive identity across the state as we plan for 2026. This is something that we been trying to do for years, and that activity has ramped up significantly. I'm going to start talking first about the audio tours themselves. Now, I mentioned that it was 10 crucial days. The importance of the audio tours is to bring people out into the landscape and the cityscape of where important things happened here in New Jersey. One of the things that got me involved in Crossroads back 14 years ago was somebody overheard me just talking about learning about all these incredible things that happened on these highways and byways that we travel every day, that literally the American Revolution occurred in our backyards, and that we don't know this. And there are ways that we need to connect this. And so the 10 Crucial Days tour was our first, probably one of the most important events, one of the most important events in the American Revolution, not just here in New Jersey during the American Revolution, but certainly an event that quite literally changed world history. So that was the one that we focused on first. And the idea behind that is to tie things together. So our 10 Crucial Days, we take people from New Hope, Pennsylvania, where the British were camping out, excuse me, not the British, the Continental soldiers were camping out after the retreat from New York and from Fort Lee, basically a ragtag bunch that was almost decimated at that point. And then George Washington decided to launch that surprise attack. And the tour itself actually guides you from the New Hope area, from the encampments across where Washington Crossing is, through down Sullivan Way into Trenton, through the route of the battle, and then out to Princeton for the second battle, and points out all along the way things that are happening. The beauty of this tour itself, it's not something that you have to do on a piece of paper. It's actually a downloadable app that you brings in not only the stories that are being told as you travel these places, and then we encourage you to stop along the way at key places like the old barracks, like the battlefields, but also that it includes all the twists and turns that you're following. And we're going to play a little clip a little later about that as well, so you get a sense of that. So our initial tour, while we just unveiled it back in December, we've already gotten a decent amount of attention to it. So if you can show the next slide, Amy. So we've gotten some coverage from Philadelphia, New Jersey News, TV, online. We've had 422 tour sessions themselves, people who've actually taken the tour out on the road, downloaded it to their phone. On top of that, we have a web presence for this tour for people who want to take the armchair tour. And we've had, according to the data that I was given, about 10,000 page views of that. So we're looking at a lot of people who are preparing as the weather gets nicer, the kinds of things that they want to do when driving around. And we're encouraging them by having this tour available to get out there and do that. As I mentioned with the 10 Crucial Days, we know a lot of people go to New Hope. We know a lot of people spend time on the Pennsylvania side. We know a lot of people go to Princeton. Do they go to Trenton? Do they think of Trenton as a tourism spot? Well, this tour helps them think of Trenton as a place to experience heritage tourism if they haven't thought of it before. And that's the idea of not only this tour, but all the tours. And I'll mention a little bit more about where we're planning to do that next. If you can go to the next slide, Amy. So the tour works like this. There's an app called Travel Stories. And this company has I think close to 200 tours now across the country that they did. So we wanted to plug into an app where there was already a built-in audience. And you download to your phone, you plug your phone into your car, and you just hit start. Everything is triggered by GPS. So you don't need cell connections. You don't need a data connection. You can go in and out of places that have spotty cell service. The GPS is what triggers the tour. And as you hit certain spots, you'll get turning directions, but you'll also get stories to play. And what we tried to do with those stories is kind of give you a sense of where you are now versus what it was like then. The idea behind this is not just to tell stories of the generals and the battles, although we certainly do that, and the 10 Crucial Days is action-packed with those things, but we also try to give you a sense of what it was like to be there and to identify with the people who actually experienced this on the ground. As we know that New Jersey was the center of what was a civil war for 8 years. And it was the people who experienced that war that makes this story interesting. And so we try to put you there and give you a sense that this story belongs to you too. You didn't have to be somebody who was deciding where the battles were fought. You were somebody who was caught in the middle and had to make decisions about how to survive from day to day. And where we hit here in trying to get people to go through Trenton is one of those places that's really evocative, particularly as you drive down Warren Street. And we just want to play you a little clip of that particular story while you're driving down Warren Street past the monument to get a sense of what this tour can do. So Amy, if you could play that.
At the time of the Revolution, this road was called King Street. As you drive down it, imagine the Hessians trying to form up in the street. Not only were they facing cannon fire, but also the storms, wind, and ice was blowing straight at them. At the same time, Continental infantry started to attack from between buildings on the right side of the street. Some local residents even joined in, firing from the windows of their houses. This was not a disciplined battle with lines of soldiers on an open field. This was urban warfare. A Hessian officer described the chaotic scene.
All at once our muskets would no longer fire off. The enemy fired at us in the flank and in the rear. Under these conditions, it was impossible to remain in line and in ranks.
The Americans easily pushed the Hessians back to a nearby apple orchard where their commander, Colonel Rahl, would be fatally wounded. After you cross State Street, take a look at the large mural in a parking area to your right. It depicts one of the first public readings of the Declaration of Independence, which took place here.
So if you've ever driven down Warren Street and you've seen the 19th century houses that are there, now you drive down it and you're listening to this story and you're thinking about this in a much different way than you may have done before. And that's the point of this tour, is to get you out and thinking about these things, and then and getting a new appreciation for them, saying, you know, I am going to stop at the old barracks. I am going to stop at Princeton Battlefield or Trent House, which we mentioned along the way, and take a closer look, because this has become much more interesting now that I am putting myself in the middle of it. Amy, if you can go to the next slide here, is that, so here is our kind of our roadmap. A literal roadmap to where we want to try to pull out these tours. So we're using routes that both the Continental, British, and including the French marched across New Jersey, is kind of creating the spines for these tours. But the tours don't necessarily need to follow the stories of those routes. We're just using those routes as ways to crisscross the state and tell a story. So for example, our second tour that we're working on right now, and that should be ready within a month or so, is we take the route, the 3-day route after the 10 crucial days that Washington marched from Princeton to encampment in Morristown. Now, one of the things that we discovered as we were planning this route out is that so much happened there over 6 years. You had the Washington-Rochambeau route coming back in the opposite direction at the end of the war. But one of the things that really struck out was that you have 3 houses along this route, this 35-mile route: Ford Mansion, Wallace in Morristown, Wallace House in Somerville, and Rockingham in Franklin Township. And when we looked at how much time George Washington spent just in those 3 houses, it was 1/5, 1 out of 5 days of his entire time as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Armed Forces. 1/5 of his entire time was spent in a 30-mile stretch in New Jersey. And that doesn't even include some of the other houses like Dye Mansion up in Patterson County, up in Wayne in Passaic County. And so, in fact, our next tour that we're doing is called Washington Slept Here, as we're claiming, rightfully so, that New Jersey is the place where Washington spent most of his time. And then this tour will take you through all those years of that happening. We're also going tours that are coming up in the next year include the retreat across the Jerseys, includes the forgotten victories of Connecticut Farms in Springfield, but it also includes other forgotten stories too. The contributions of folks, people who are underrepresented when we tell these stories. That includes African Americans, both enslaved and free. It includes the story and contributions, incredible contributions of women, particularly here in New Jersey, where there are such fascinating stories, from Molly Pitcher to Hannah Caldwell. and so many more in between. So what we encourage you to do, if you haven't done already, is to download the tour to your phone or to visit it on our online application. You can go to revolutionarynj.org/audio tours to get more information about how to do that. So even if you haven't taken the tour yet, just getting a sense of how this tour works will be really helpful. I think particularly those partners out there who are thinking about, are we going to have a tour pass near our area? And the answer is that's the plan. Yes, we want to do that. And how do we incorporate those stories into these larger tours that we're taking people through? We want to give them a sense of the whole breadth of the impact of the Revolutionary War here in New Jersey, so people can find relevance in those stories. All right, so if we go to the next slide, Amy, let's talk about our partner program here. Right now we have 218 members and partners in our membership partnership program, and many of them are historical societies and associations that are not managing a site. And that's the key. That's the key for us, is taking stories and attaching them to places that people are going to be. Giving them a sense of the huge breadth that this story entails. But we also need to connect them to DMOs and county economic development offices. And these are also partners in our program as well. The idea is providing professional development, providing those consultations, those connections, and also promoting their events. And that is going to ramp up significantly as we move into 2026. Next slide. Another key thing that we've been doing, as I mentioned at the top, is rolling out our brand through signage. So we've had more and more signs being rolled out, with most recently at the Morristown National Historical Park. To come back to that six-pointed star that is in our logo there, the idea behind the six-pointed star is that it is evocative of being in the middle of a crossroads. But it also, for those of you who know this, it was part of the original battle flag that was designed by New Jerseyan Francis Hopkinson, and is recognized by many as the first officially commissioned American flag design. Everybody knows the apocryphal story of Betsy Ross, but there is actually documentation from Francis Hopkinson about his design and how it was used. And we know that George Washington used it as in battle as well. So that's where our star comes from. We very much New Jersey centric in what we're trying to do, and claim again that New Jersey really was the center of the war for quite some time. Going on to the next slide here. So we have a few more signs coming up, particularly those funded through a program with the American Battlefield Protection program. Camden County is doing some signs and signage and some audio tour development that will assist with around the Battle of Gloucester and other events down there. Princeton Battlefield is also looking at ways to interpret their area with signage and audio, and we'll be working with them as well. All right, so let me move on to just one other recognition that I want to make here. One of our longtime board members, Laura Swack, will be leaving us. She has been on the board for 9 years. And she's term limited, so she's leaving the board and moving on to other things. But when I was chair of the board, when she first joined, one of the programs that we had available to us was funding through Green Acres that was specifically dedicated to Rev War projects. And we had the opportunity for guidance on those programs. That we would get the money, somewhere $100,000, $250,000 that we could use towards purchase of and protection of land that had some association with the Revolutionary War. Now, Crossroads does not own land, so the thing that we needed to do was find partners who were looking to preserve Revolutionary War areas and hopefully interpret them in the future. And Laura decided that we didn't have the staff to do this. And Laura came in and said, I will do this. I will take on this role and I will help do this. And over the past few years, we've contributed to preserving 3 properties with 294 acres. A couple of them were affiliated with the encampments of both British and American soldiers around the Battle of Monmouth. Another one is affiliated with an encampment related to the Washington Rochambeau march to Yorktown. And these are just really incredible, outcomes that we've been able to put this land aside and dedicate it, and in the future look towards using it as parkland and passive recreation affiliated with these events. And this would not have happened without Laura just picking this up and running with it. So Laura, we all owe you a great big debt of thanks here at Crossroads, and wish you the best as in your next endeavors. We'll also have some more announcements of some changes here at Crossroads at the end of this. And I also know there's a couple questions here about the tours that we're doing, but I'm going to hold off on those questions in the Q&A, because I really want to get to our speakers. And if we go to the next slide here, the key here that what Crossroads has been doing is, in preparing for the 250th, is a lot of background research. And that research is trying to just figure out, where do we stand? What do you have as resources? What do we have as challenges? So we've been doing a number of studies. And while they've been planning purposes for the 250th and the Revolution NJ partnership, there are lessons that we've learned from them that we want to share with you as sooner rather than later. And that's why we have our 2 speakers here today to share some of those lessons, so that everybody can get kind of on the ball and start planning right away. So our first speaker today is going to be Cheryl Hargrove, who is the president of Hargrove International. She's an advisor to our partnership for Revolution NJ, the 250th. She was the first Heritage Tourism Director for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. She's consulted in all 50 states as well as 15 countries, and she has extensive experience here in New Jersey. One of the things that we're trying to do with the 250th as we prepare for it is to up our heritage tourism game. New Jersey, about 6% of New Jersey's tourism visits come from via heritage tourism. And that amounts to about $300 and some million in state and local tax revenue, about $3 billion in economic impact across the state. That sounds really good if you just listen to those numbers by themselves. That's about half of the national average. If we were doing the national average in heritage tourism activity, we would have doubled that number. If we were doing the kind of heritage tourism activity as our neighbor states are doing, we would triple that. And so Cheryl has been instrumental in helping us identify where our challenges have been and what we needed to go forward. And she'll be talking a little bit about that here in her presentation. Our other speaker, who I'll introduce now before we get to him, is Jeff Vasser, who's the Executive Director of the New Jersey Division of Travel and Tourism. He's the former president of the Atlantic City Convention and Visitors Authority. Jeff's background is not in heritage tourism, but we are fortunate to have somebody who believes and advocates for the value and potential of weaving heritage tourism and that market into New Jersey's very important tourism economy. So he'll be talking a little bit about what he sees as the future there. But that is all I'm going to say right now, because I want to turn it over to Cheryl and Jeff. If you have any questions for them, please put them in the Q&A. If there's something that you want to share with everybody, or something that sparks, something that you think you should share, you can also use the chat function as well, I think is maybe available there. So if we, without further ado, let me turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And I am just delighted to be here with you and want to just really help you understand what we've been able to look at and find out, but also maybe give you some instruction that can help you even move forward today. This is mostly based on the site participation report that I conducted last year, and it really updates the visitor readiness of sites post-COVID, but it also then thinks about where is the traveling public post-COVID and really thinking about how do we prepare. So there were 6 key findings from this report and from the analysis that we did, and I want to just kind of share them with you now. I will say that these don't probably come as any surprise to you. You know, that it is hard to find information online. It's not necessarily connected. Everyone is having a challenge with lack of staff. In fact, that's something that all industries are seeing, particularly the tourism industry, but then particularly for historic sites as well. There's maybe a disconnect between heritage sites and the tourism industry. There's some sites that really do a great job of marriage and working together, but there's still some opportunities there across the state. I think the finding 4 is one of the key elements though, and that is really being able to interpret themes more diversely. As Patrick shared, we've got a lot of great themes already in development with the tour program, but I think it's also important to think about, you know, those underserved populations that we want to connect with. And then that goes to finding 5, which is how do you use this research? How do you find this research and then make it where it comes to life at your site? And then looking, obviously, if people don't know where you are, then it's hard to actually locate you. So we had 4 recommendations that I'd like to just go into. And one is that it's the obvious. It's being open to the public, offering programs of interest and relevance, and giving people a reason to return. You know, even when I was doing some of my assessments, I have, as Patrick mentioned, done a lot of work in New Jersey over the last 25 years. And some sites I went to had not changed their program in that time. So there really wasn't a reason for me to go back. And so that to me is one of the key reasons of how to offer these new programs, new perspectives, and also new conversations. And it also looks at making sure that your site is really welcoming and visitor ready, and making sure that it is up to par as to other experiences. It's looking also at how to integrate experts so that we're all on the same page. And this is a proposal of how everybody can be working together, but this is something that is under conversation of dedicated personnel in both state parks, as well as Division of Tourism, as well as at Crossroads, so that everything can be looked at from a focus of program development to program marketing to program delivery. The second is to develop and showcase the exceptional. And I think that this is where, you know, I go back to programming, I go back to the importance of those really innate, engaging stories that demonstrate the diversity that New Jersey owns, that really is distinctive from all the other sites focusing on the Revolutionary War era, that you have so many themes, you have so many different locations that really can come to life by focusing on these kinds of elements. To that end, I mean, we did look at, there were, you know, a number, over 100 and some sites that were a focus, and then we looked at 65 sites, and we looked at, wow, how could we really then focus on a core group of sites that tell different stories that are different from Pennsylvania and New York and Virginia, but also that really, when you piece them together like a puzzle, they come out with this incredible tablet of information that really enriches that understanding of for the audience. So these core sites are ones because of their significant story ideas, compositions. That does not mean that other sites are not included. It just means that these become a way to focus the information, focus those themes, focus those delivery mechanisms, so that there is that hook to bring people in and from other states or from other countries into New Jersey to experience the Revolutionary War era. And looking at it again, as Patrick said, from all those different perspectives, the layman, the enslaved, the free, the farmer, the family, the immigrant, really does help then connect the various audiences so that they can see themselves in these situations and bring the past to present, which is a critical component for when we're talking about complex and difficult issues, bringing it to light and making it, contemporary. I think about Ukraine and all of the immigrants that are having to flee their country. And, how can we then use what happened almost 250 years ago as a context for today's contemporary learning? One of the things that Crossroads is doing is a new program that'll start in the next few weeks called Streetside Storytellers. And I know you'll hear more about that, but it is looking at how to actually focus on these stories and bring them to light. And the third is how to connect all these experiences, to define them and showcase them, as we mentioned, to link them along a linear or thematic route, and then to demonstrate to the traveling public that why no Revolutionary War tour is complete without a visit to New Jersey. So one of the things that has been considered is a visitor experience center that really helps introduce visitors to this unique Revolutionary War experience, but also help them then go out and find these in other places. And finally, to market with confidence. And I think that this is something that, as Jeff will talk a little bit more about, I will just go ahead and skip over, but just knowing that engaging with his office and being involved in supporting the ways that he's going to get those messages out and those activities is very important. You heard about the travel story. I think that's one idea that is really central to what Crossroads is doing. There's other ideas that are being explored, but in the to make sure we have time, I wanted just to share a couple trends because Sally recognizes that I always enjoy trends because they help us stay current in what's happening in the consumer's life. And certainly post-COVID, we have some to consider. So one of those is the desire for expert-led tours. And I'm going to give a couple ideas of how you can take advantage of these trends in a moment. But this is certainly where, like even NPR is going beyond the news because they recognize the fact that, people want to have someone with authority, some professor or an historian that can actually provide factual information that is going to be something that, as NPR travel program that just started last year says, helps curious minds be more immersive, educational, and expert-led. And we found this in a transformational learning lab that, this is something that the educational travel community certainly wants, both adults and students, and they're looking for, this kind of guidance. And this is where all of you can be a resource for tour programs. The second is greater diversity and inclusion. I mean, not surprising with all that has happened with social justice movements of late, that this is where multiple perspectives and different perspectives are important. And it is particularly important because we need to make sure that those audience that may not have visited our sites feel welcome, feel that they are represented, and that their stories are being told. In fact, when we look at even the changing population and our own demographics, that is going to be important for us to understand not only the Hispanic population, but also the African American, Black population, and ensuring that their stories are being, and history is being told. And it is also important that we look at, history has favored, white populations have gone more to historic sites than other populations. How do we change that balance? And it is through distinctive stories. And finally, destination stewardship. We're not anywhere without our historic sites as far as being able to really tell the visual context of place. And so it is important that we make sure that people feel welcome and respecting these sites, but also that we are focusing on ways to make sure our place is kept where, people can see where Washington slept. People can see and experience those murals that tell the artifacts in archives where you actually see a declaration that's been marked up or the Bill of Rights. And so all of those kinds of things are so important to heritage tourism distinctly. Quickly, I want to go through 10 ways you can get started in visitor readiness now. One is keeping your website current. It seems pretty obvious, but it's something that takes time and we all need to be doing it. Second is to confirm your Google business listing. When I was actually trying to go and experience places, I would go here and not always was the information accurate. It wasn't always complete. And the hours particularly were not necessarily the same as what was the reality. Check your TripAdvisor listing, or if you don't have one, make sure you do have one, because this is very important for visitors, particularly if they're looking for things to do when they're travel and where they're looking for places to go and things to do. Add your event listing to visit nj.org. I know Jeff will talk a little bit more about that, so I will skip over that, but also make sure that you're staying social and that you are looking at ways to really maximize your connectivity to potential audiences and your current customers as well. Photography is very important as we look at, a visual society, and that's what's going to draw you in, but also because New Jersey has 4 seasons, making sure that you can provide those, especially given the fact that a lot of battles didn't just happen in the summertime. They happened at all different times, as we saw in the travel story about, think about the pelting rain or whatever. So how that can be shared. Update and distribute your brochure, if you have one, to make sure that the hours and everything else is accurate. Again, people will pick these up as they're on site and maybe going from one place to another. So it is critical to have this information current as well. And back to the whole idea of a trend of academic adventures, which was one of the Future 100's 2022 trends. Identify those local experts that you can actually have as a step-on guide, or that you could have as an evening program, or that could be a special tour. Those will be the kinds of things that will be important when you're trying to position yourselves as an expert in this area. Work with historians to research new content. I know that there's going to be some things coming forward on how you can access public historians that can help you with this research, but think broader, think more than just your traditional story of what maybe you've told over the last several years. And finally, contact and work with your local tourism bureau and partners. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but I know we want to get to Jeff, so I will just say thank you. Be mindful of these 5 principles as we go forward, and I will conclude my remarks.
Thanks, Cheryl. And again, put your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them when Jeff is done there. So let's turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Patrick, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I can't tell you all how fortunate we are to have Cheryl on this team working for New Jersey, because one, her breadth of knowledge and experience just brings, a great insight to what we're doing in New Jersey. And for me, it makes my job a lot easier, because my job, frankly, is to help implement the findings that she comes up with. So thank you, Cheryl, for taking 3/4 of the work off of my plate. But I want to say that it's hard to believe that 2026, in my mind, is almost upon us. I came onto this job 4 years ago and remembered thinking that, oh my goodness, 8 years, that's just forever away. We've got all the time in the world. And in just a flash, 4 years has flown by. And I know the next 4 are going to fly by too. So not only does that give me a lot of excitement, but certainly a little bit of agita as well. So, but it's a great opportunity for us. And heritage tourism, as Patrick said, I don't come from that background, but I am certainly passionate about it. And from selfish point of view, it is our next great hook to bring visitors into New Jersey. The mantra that the Secretary of State, Tahisha Way, who's been a great supporter of heritage tourism, said to me on my first day is, we want to make heritage tourism as iconic as the Jersey Shore. And we now have, 4 short years to make that happen. So moving forward, starting now, heritage tourism and the Rev War celebration is front and center for us. Our goal, as you've heard, is to drive new visitors, to keep them here longer, and then for all of us to collectively remarket to everybody so that it's not just a one-shot deal, that people are going to come one time in July of 2026 and then not come back. We want to keep this as an ongoing event and an ongoing collaboration for all of us, so that heritage tourism becomes a much bigger part of the visitor complex than just the 6% that we're currently at. As Cheryl mentioned, first and foremost, collaboration is key. What we want to do is we want to solve the problem of planning that Cheryl pointed out, make sure that everybody, if they want to, create a trip, that we're going to make this easy for them. So one way is to work with us. Cheryl talked about making sure that all of your websites are updated, but work with us to make sure that everything you have is updated on our website as well. We're in the final stages of upgrading our website. So we want to make sure that we have the latest and greatest information on all of your sites. We want to make sure that it's accurate, and we want to make sure that people are able to link directly to it. Social media posts, we're going to be doing a much bigger and more intensive social media campaign. We're going to be posting a lot more. We're going to be doing a lot in the way of video. And the more that you can get us your content, the more we can push it out and create a story around it. It isn't just to push it out individually, but we want to create that story of New Jersey and heritage. We ask that you participate in our events. We're going to be creating a lot of heritage related events over the next couple of years. We're going to be doing FAM tours. If you're not familiar with that term, familiarization tours, we're going to be bringing media, writers that are focused on that niche market of the Revolutionary War and heritage tourism, and bring them through New Jersey. So we ask that you help support us by hosting the writers that are going to be coming through. We're going to be working with our PR firm, Lou Hammond Group, who has some background in heritage tourism, and they're going to be keying up a new program just to focus on getting PR related articles and reaching out to those media that focus on that area. What we'd like to do is facilitate a meeting with our PR firm so that you can all understand about the importance of writing a press release. And in some cases, even understanding how to write a press release. But at the same time, what we want to do is make sure that they are aware of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and to make sure that it comes together as part of that big package. We want to make sure that you're working with your DMOs, your destination marketing organizations, getting to know your area hotels, your restaurants, your attractions, the shopping. The way we're going to keep people, we're going to get visitors to come here and stay longer, is to create more of reasons for them to stay in your area. Earlier, we talked about the core sites. If your site is not a core site, we don't want people to drive through and just pass by. We want to make sure that they say, well, look, not only can we look at this particular site, but there's a great restaurant there. There's some great shopping. There's a great downtown. There's several museums in that area we'd like to see. So what it does is creates a reason for people to stay in an area much longer, and maybe even give people a reason to stay overnight one more night so that they can do that, see your site. So if you're not one of those core sites, it's even more important that you work with your DMOs. And if you don't know them, what we're going to be doing is creating an opportunity to facilitate meetings with your DMOs to make sure you know who they are and you have all of your information, to them. We want to make sure that all of this packaging is done right, and that disconnect that Cheryl talked about with tourism sites between you and the other attractions in your area. We break down any barriers and we break down those walls. So we want to be able to facilitate that meeting very soon. From our role, what we're going to be doing is, I mentioned the new website that we're going to be working on. And a big component of it is going to be for that website to allow for itineraries to be created, trip planners to be a part of that component, so that people can go on and, again, solve that trip planning problem that Cheryl identified as part of the New Jersey issue. So we want to make sure that our website is foremost on that area to make sure that people can, focus and create their trip. We're going to be focusing on those niche markets, as I mentioned, with new funding. We're going to be working with Crossroads and some of the other groups to help fund more of those audio tours, podcasts, and other types of marketing campaigns, remarketing campaigns, social media. We're going to be putting more of our money towards funding a lot of these things. We have a new international initiative that's going on. I mentioned this at a previous meeting. We're going to be working with the UK, Germany, Canada, and then we're going to be getting into China, India, Brazil as well. But right now, one of the things we're doing is working with Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware on a program where we can all share our itineraries and trip planning to focus on the international market. Because as you all know, if you're going on an international trip, people are going to stay longer just by definition if they're coming in. They're going to be here for a week at a time. We want to make sure that if they're going to New York, and we can attract them and give them an incentive to drive through Pennsylvania, look at those sites, to drive through our state and see all those sites, and then come in through Delaware. The idea is to create a region, a heritage region of New Jersey. We're going to come up obviously with a new catchy name to make sure that the international markets and the UK particularly, they've got certainly some history with this as well. And we don't want to leave them out of this. We can have a lot of fun on advertising and PR with the UK with some back and forth. And we want to take advantage of that opportunity over the next couple of years. So we're going to be putting a good amount of money into the UK market, focusing on the upcoming celebration of the 250th. Currently, we're working on a strategic plan. Many of you have heard that the Travel and Tourism Division has recently got an addition to our budget. We've gone from $9 million to $17 million over the past 2 years. And right now we're working on a strategic plan to help determine the staffing, the segments, and the other programs that we have that can really work towards heritage tourism. So we're going to be looking at, one of the things is going to be, what is the staffing we need? What is the marketing we need for heritage tourism? So in Cheryl's diagram, she talked about having a marketing coordinator for that niche market. And I think it's a very important role for us to have. We're also going to be attending trade shows and consumer shows that focus on that market. And we're going to be working with all of you and all of our other partners to make sure that that strategic plan really focuses heavily on this niche market. Grants. Some of you may know that we have an existing co-op grant program. You can use it for everything from creating brochures to full marketing plans. The dollar amount is basically between $5,000 and $25,000 that you can use for marketing plans, marketing programs, or specific events. You can go onto our website now, visit nj.org. And at the bottom, you'll see grant opportunities. Click that link. It's open now. Applications are due in May. And again, here's an opportunity for you to get some additional funding to create a brochure if you don't have one, or to create a website if you don't have one. That's what these grants are being used for. We also got an EDA grant, $15 million as part of the COVID recovery. And it allows for not just marketing for us, but it allows for physical upgrades to sites. It allows for visitor training. So we plan on working with all of you to see how we can Support Crossroads and Revolution NJ, and all of the groups that are a part of this, to help support what you're all doing so that we're going to be ready to make sure that your sites are visitor ready, and that all your people are trained so that we can move forward and start attracting people over the next couple of years. We also are going to have a new co-op program that we're going to be using for advertising to enhance photo libraries, the audio tours that I talked about on the podcasts. But sometimes, this is going to be available to our DMOs as well. But oftentimes we reach out to you for high resolution photography and videos that, magazines and websites need to support a story. A lot of people don't have that, and they're expensive. So what we want to do is support that by paying a portion of that and creating a co-op program where everybody can tap into that, mostly through your DMOs, to make that happen. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we recently had a meeting at the Proprietary House up in Perth Amboy. It was hosted by Speaker Coughlin. And the exciting part about that meeting was not only did the speaker pledge his support for all of us. He's a big believer and supporter of the Proprietary House, but we had a lot of stakeholders in that meeting representing a lot of different areas, a lot of different components of heritage tourism. And he really took to what we were saying and realized how important it is. And hopefully that's going to help us get the support from the legislature that we're going to be needing to make sure that we can market effectively and that we can get all of our sites up and ready to go. But there's going to be a lot more in the way of being able to present our ideas, planning, and to introduce heritage tourism to the rest of the state. So that's my report right now. Next year, I hope we're going to be in position. I know we're going to be in a position where we will have a very robust PowerPoint presentation to show you of the PR campaigns that we've had, of the advertising campaigns, some of the co-op programs that we've done. And I'm very excited about the upcoming year. So thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with all of you. I can't stay long, unfortunately, for any questions, but again, it's been an honor, and I look forward to meeting the rest of you. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Jeff. Do you have time for one quick question before you
Sure.
run off?
Sure.
There was a question about the grant opportunities that you mentioned, and Amy Osterhout from our staff posted the link there for your site. Is there anything specific about the qualifications for being able to apply for that? Somebody asked, are county offices that run historic sites eligible?
No, anybody can apply for these grants. It's being judged by the value of tourism that's created, by the room nights created. So we have an outside firm or an outside committee that judges it. So local events, things that really just appeal to your municipality, an arts festival that's just local, those really don't qualify it. But for the things that are going to create overnight visitation, drive people to not only your event, but to the restaurants and the other attractions in the area, those are going to get a lot more points scored to do that. There is a match component that's a part of it, but it's small. But basically, again, you can apply for anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000, depending on what you want to do. And because of our additional funding, more opportunities are out there for people to get it. Up until now, it's basically been, it's good until the pot's empty, but the pot's bigger now.
And the other question is, the New Jersey Historic Trust also has a heritage tourism grant program for specific things related to heritage tourism. What's different between that and the travel and tourism grant project?
Ours is not specific to heritage. Basically, it's a competitive process that is for everybody. Right now, current recipients include, the Balloon Festival, as well as the Haskell horse race at Monmouth Park, seafood festivals up and down the coast. So ours is just not specific to it, and you're competing against, everybody.
All right, so our advice is, make sure you closely read the guidelines for each of those grant programs, because they're going to be different in terms of what you're trying to do. As Jeff mentioned, if you're doing a local event program, the New Jersey Travel and Tourism is not the place for you, but the Heritage Tour, the Historic Trust program may be the place to do it if it has a particular community impact.
Can't hurt to apply to both.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Okay. Other questions that we have, and Jeff, I know if you have to go, because he has to catch a train. And I think that's what we have.
Thank you, everybody, and Patrick knows where to reach me.
Yep. Yes, and we'll keep that conversation going. Thank you very much, Jeff, for agreeing to take time today.
My pleasure.
Join us. All right, we're going to continue with some questions here with Cheryl, and let me start off a couple of things. There are a couple of questions about the audio tour, so I'm going to come back to them later. So let's get to the question specifically about tourism. There was a question, Cheryl, about basically technical assistance and some guidance for some of those things that you said about getting your TripAdvisor up and running and getting your Google business listing accurate.
Yeah, I actually answered that because I think the best place is to go to the source. TripAdvisor has a great support section, and that is really for the TripAdvisor listing itself. I really encourage also, though, if you have misinformation in some of your reviews, or if you have misinformation, or maybe somebody's just really giving you a shout out, make sure you're engaging with them, because that actually helps with your SEO. It actually helps with your TripAdvisor listing. Same thing with Google Maps, but I do.
And SEO is search engine optimization, which means just basically getting your site at the top of the list when somebody searches Google for something related to what you're offering.
Right. And I also do, there is also, there are Google My Business webinars and things like that. I will provide a list of those resources to Crossroads so that you can have that information. It should be, helpful at least. And if not, I'll be glad to help as well.
Yes, and also what we're looking at, and in fact, our public partner in the planning for the 250th, the New Jersey Historic Commission, is in fact looking to create a position that will help people, because we understand that not every, a lot of these sites are run entirely by volunteers.
Right.
And that they neither have the time nor necessarily the savvy, understanding how all these things work to kind of figure that out. There's a learning curve involved. And so we're looking for ways to basically provide you with that level of support, whether it is just simply pointing somebody who can figure it out for themselves where they need to go. But I think we assume that in some places, somebody's going to need a little bit more hand-holding for that. And so we're going to have some technical assistance programs available in the very near future for folks to do that. Let me see, what else do we have here? I'm going past the tour itself. I'm
good. I'm just mention, Patrick, one person said, don't forget veterans. I think that,
yes,
that's an excellent suggestion. And I think, again, what you're doing is you're thinking of how audiences can be connected to your sites. And so think about all of those as you look at your site, as you look at your opportunity of who are those audiences that are going to find interest in your story, but also that you can engage in that story, because that's part of it too, because then they're going to bring their groups and they will then, spread your community even larger.
Right. And one of the things that we are looking at, and Crossroads has been doing this with our storytelling, has been that there are a lot of different groups that have an interest here. And if we can tell stories that get them here to see their connection. So Jeff mentioned, that they're looking at tourism from Britain coming up in 2026. We also know that there is a significant interest from Germany as well, from relatives of the descendants of the Hessians who served here, some of whom settled here. And they're looking for those connections, or looking where an ancestor served. Some of the best stories that we have, or some of the most interesting stories we have, are stories that we found in the pension applications of Revolutionary War soldiers. And in fact, some of our stories are built around how how these veterans described their service during that time, and that's a great way to connect with veterans today. Is that our storytelling is about sitting around with a beer and telling stories. It's what these pension applications are really like when you read them. So they're kind of interesting. So that is something that's really going to be a key going forward. And if you look at Revolution NJ, the partnership is going to be making some announcements in this summer, in July, with the first round of events that we're working on, as well as the website and other ways. They're going to get assistance and input into what's going on here. And so we'll wait till we have all those ducks lined up for that announcement. But this is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking at, and that our working groups are looking at, is how to make all those different connections with all those groups. So everybody bringing up those groups, it helps us kind of think about, oh, where's a connection here? Where can we pull somebody in who might not have thought that this was something that would interest them, that's something that would have relevance to them in the past? Which actually leads me to a question that somebody brought up about the reenactments. So in the bicentennial, yes, there were a lot of huge reenactments, and we anticipate there are going to be a lot of huge reenactments this coming commemoration period as well. The partnership with Crossroads and New Jersey Historic Commission and our other stakeholders will plan some of them, but what we're going to do is, I think mainly we're going to be providing support to the groups that already do a good job at planning those things. We don't want to step in and take over something that somebody else does, but we know that there are reenactments that are done at Monmouth and Washington Crossing and Princeton and a whole host of other places regularly, and everybody's going to want to make them bigger during the 250th commemoration of those events as well. And so our job is to step in and say, where do you need, what kind of resources can we bring to the table to help you make that bigger as you plan that? So that's going to be our role in that going forward. And I know that those groups have already started talking about how they're going to do that. Let's see, what other questions do we have here that we can answer? How is the private sector being engaged for marketing, funding, and support? And public and private is essential to get things done, and that certainly is something that we're looking at. If we go back to the 15 sites, the core sites that Cheryl mentioned, and when she was doing her research, there was a number of things that came into play in developing that list. Not all of those sites are going to be up and running full speed by the time we get to 2026. But a core number need to be, in order to be able to brand New Jersey as a destination. And the reason why those core sites were pulled together is that, can we create that network of sites that tell complementary stories and have ADA accessibility and have bathrooms and have a place where people can buy gifts and figure out where to go to eat, and have parking, and have historical interpretation full-time, that they're open all the time. That's the key. And so one of the things that we understand is, in order to get that done, we're going to need probably some sort of public-private partnership in managing the sites as well, and providing those visitor services to those sites. And that includes the potential for a kind of a hallmark brand facility that would be central as a central hub for sending people out to these sites, a new kind of experience center here in New Jersey as well, that would tell that story. And so I'm going to put my little pitch in here now, is that we identified in these studies probably about $40 million in immediate capital needs for the state-owned historic sites that would be part of this core, just the state-owned sites, not the other sites. One of the things that we've discovered that others that other states have picked up on, and New Jersey has not quite picked up on, is that you have to have something to market, that you have to have these sites open and available. New Jersey and New York are kind of in the same boat. So let me back up. I was looking at a list, like I was looking about 7 or 8 different lists of the most important Revolutionary War battles. So these are from historians and others across the board. 4 continually came up. So 4 were in every single list. They included Bunker Hill and the Siege of Boston, Saratoga, Yorktown, and Trenton. 3 of those sites are national parks or national monuments. One of them is a state monument and state parks affiliated with it. So we're behind the curve in terms of the attention that we're giving to one of the most important events in the war. And New York is much in the same boat that we are. We have one national park related to the Revolutionary War in Morristown. They basically have one national park in Saratoga. All their other sites are state-owned sites in New York. They're going through a budget process right now. They're supposed to vote on the budget this week, but the governor of New York proposed in her budget increasing funding for state parks, an increase of $1 billion, an increase of $1 billion over 5 years. Of that, it was included an increase of $40 million just for historic sites as a base increase, plus additional funding to create new Revolutionary War state historic sites and linkages. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars or more on top of that. In New Jersey, we can't open our sites because they're either not staffed or they're falling apart. So while we have some successes, like the new visitor center that's going up at Washington Crossing State Park, we have a lot of other places that will not be ready for visitors in 2026 if we don't put shovels in the ground by the end of this year. We have made this presentation to the governor's office, and while the governor's office has indicated that they understand the return on investment that this would have for the state and how important this is for the state, they did not include that in their proposed budget to the legislature. So we are now in a position where we're going to the legislature itself. And Jeff Vasser mentioned a meeting that we had with this that was hosted by Speaker Coughlin at Proprietary House, where we do feel that the speaker fully understood that you can't just fix one site. You've got to get all of them up and running. You've got to get a public-private partnership in shape. You got to run these things. You've got to figure out how that we're going to have not just places open for 2026, but a heritage tourism economy that's going to last for generations to come and contribute back to the state. The speaker gets that. We just need the rest of the legislature to get that. We need to put pressure on the governor as well to do that in this coming year. There's money available in the state. We know there's capital money available in the state to do these things. It's relatively a drop in the bucket when we look at a lot of other priorities that the state has had for bringing folks in, from bringing the World Cup here in 2026 to bringing a French art museum to Jersey City. If we can't open our doors in 2026 to greet people to a place that quite literally changed the future of democracy in the world, I'm not sure what our priorities are here in this state. And so we're going to call on all of you, our partners, to kind of make that case to our legislators and to the governor's office that we need to do this today, or it's going to be an embarrassment. So that's just my pitch.
Patrick, may I just inject from an external perspective too? And since Jeff isn't on this call right now, it will make it harder for him to be a peer partner in a multi-state campaign internationally if we don't have the sites open and on par with our other states, New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, because a visitor doesn't understand boundaries and they don't really care who's responsible for it. They just want to know they're going to have the exceptional experience. That benefit cost ratio is going to be tipped out because their time and money is worth it. So that's also a competitive concern for New Jersey of being at this level playing field.
And right. And if you think if the World Cup does come to New Jersey in 2026, during the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, where are those folks going to go? Well, you have your national parks in Pennsylvania. And as I said, we have the state of New York has looked at this and said, oh, we want some of those folks too. So they're going to come to New York, they're going to come to New Jersey for the soccer game and then leave to commemorate the 250th while they're here. That's just untenable. And so we have to make that case.
And we will never, and New Jersey will never get to even the national average of heritage tourism if it doesn't have the product and experience to offer, bottom line.
And one of the questions that we have here that I want to come back to is the smaller sites and the non-site organizations here. And this is the idea behind the core sites and creating a core site. And this is what Jeff alluded to, is that when you create this core and you have people traveling across the state and spending more time here, that then becomes the motivation or the impetus for greater private investment in other places that are smaller sites, to be open more often, to have more resources, to do more things. And that's the point, is that we are not forgetting the smaller sites. The idea behind creating these core sites is so that those smaller sites get elevated as well. This is a kind of the rising tide lifts all boats mentality here. But we have to be able to create that brand. You know, people go to Boston and they go to, the Boston area because it was the cradle of liberty. But as we here in New Jersey know, if you add up what happened in Boston, it was 1 year and done. That's the extent of the Revolutionary War. Here in New Jersey, it's pretty much all 8 years of the war. And we don't brand the fact that we are the crossroads of the American Revolution in the same way that Boston brands it being the cradle of liberty. But Boston has a couple of advantages. In addition to being a central city itself, all the major sites are national, are run by the National Park Service. And so Boston doesn't have to put in, and Massachusetts doesn't have to put that money into maintaining and running those sites. They just create the peripheral sites that support that, and then the marketing of those sites. Same thing in Pennsylvania. We have to run those sites and market them. So the first step right now is making sure our sites are up and running and are open and available to visitors, and provide that kind of in-depth immersive experience that you need to be able to market folks. So if we don't put those shovels in the ground this year, as Cheryl said, there's nothing to market. I mean, as enthusiastic as Jeff is about trying to make New Jersey the place to come, most of those sites where they would come to are owned by the state, and therefore the state has to fix its own house before we can do anything else. But the smaller sites are going to be a key part of that. That's the idea, is that they're going to benefit from this.
And may I mention that they also have an opportunity to provide a different lens. I love the idea of the Friends and Quakers, the meeting houses, and also looking at providing that perspective. Again, I look at how New Jersey is different from other states, and it is the everyday person whose lives was touched in some way by the war because of being crossroads of battles and movements and everything else. And those are the stories that will be really relevant to people to think about as they look at, a tour program, a story that's not being told in other places.
There are a lot of great suggestions here too, so we're gonna compile them as well, because we're really moving forward with this, and these things are great. I'm looking from side to side as I look at the different screens that are coming up and the things that are there. So that's the plan. I mean, our plan is there's no reason why this shouldn't be big, because New Jersey deserves it, and we have the ability to compete with Massachusetts and Pennsylvania Virginia. I mean, Virginia, for goodness sakes, it's Yorktown, and people think of New Jersey, Virginia as a more important state than New Jersey for one battle that occurred there. So we're going to take this to the next level because we deserve to be on that pantheon, and we have the ability to do it if we make the investment today. So we're running towards the end of our time. And as I mentioned before, we have some other announcements that we need to make. So I want to thank Cheryl very much for taking the time out and your sage advice and the tidbit, the kind of the things that you can hook onto and you can do today to make improvements so we can build towards this very quickly. So I appreciate that very much, Cheryl, for your time and for all your advice and help through this process. So let me turn it over to Janice to talk a little bit about what's going on Crossroads with our staffing as we're in this transition period here.
Thank you, Patrick. And Amy, if you can turn your camera on for a minute. I do have some Crossroads staffing updates, and I'm really sorry to say that our program manager, Amy Osterhout, is leaving Crossroads for another position later this week. Joining in November 2019, Amy quickly took on what would become a very successful Heritage Partner Workshop that was well attended with great feedback from participants. Shortly after that, the COVID pandemic uprooted all of our personal and work lives and caused many of our partner groups to shut down and events to be canceled, making interaction that much more difficult. We so appreciate Amy's many efforts building relationships with partners, with online workshops, work on our audio tour, and attending in-person events as they started to be scheduled again. Amy was a wonderful addition to our team, always willing to tackle additional projects. We will truly miss her and wish her much success in the future. Thank you, Amy. Additionally, I also have an announcement to make. I've served as executive director of Crossroads since October 2017, applying my craft as a storyteller and award-winning producer to promote one of New Jersey's great assets, its revolutionary heritage. Since then, our team has done substantial foundational work for the 250th, while increasing visibility and support for Crossroads. We've worked to build a successful framework for the 250th in partnership with the New Jersey Historical Commission, progress which has been recognized nationally. We conducted the first visitor readiness assessment of 150 Revolutionary War sites in New Jersey, the first step in preparing our state's heritage tourism asset for a rush of visitors in 2026. We've secured funding and have installed many of our Crossroads branded signage. We raised funds for a number of our audio tours and launched the 10 Crucial Days audio tour to introduce New Jersey's revolutionary stories to heritage travelers and new audiences. Look for the latest interview I arranged with Patrick Murray on NJ Business Beat with Rhonda Schlafler, which will air this Saturday, April 9th at 5 p.m. on NJ PBS. We also developed and raised funds for our Street Side Storytellers project that Cheryl told you about. And we've also been capturing videos at a number of revolutionary events around the state. I have enjoyed working with and getting to know many of you on this Zoom call over the past 5 years. I want you to know that I will be stepping down as executive director effective July 1, 2022, to allow for a new executive director to move the organization through 2026 and beyond. I do appreciate the opportunity to have served as executive director and to help build the foundation to assure that New Jersey gets even more recognition as the crossroads of the American Revolution. It's been an honor to have led Crossroads during this critical planning phase for the future of Revolution NJ. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, very much. And first, just let me thank Amy. It's been a pleasure to work with Amy. Amy and I worked together very closely on the audio tours. And it's always a good sign when you have somebody who, has other opportunities to present themselves, that you've been able to put a staff member in a good position to move on up in the world. So we're very happy for Amy, despite the fact that we will miss her very much. Let me also then address to Janice. When Janice came on board 5 years ago, we were a organization in transition, as much as we're in an organization in transition today, as we're going on a much more heritage tourism footing. There is no question that we are a stronger organization today at Crossroads than we were 5 years ago when Janice joined us. Janice has introduced us to a number of different stakeholders, constituent groups, and importantly, funders that we did not have, in our Rolodex at the time that she started. And that has been, really successful in helping to get our name out and start to roll out some of the visibility that we needed as we moved ourselves into this position where we can play a central role in building the heritage tourism infrastructure that's needed to take New Jersey to and our Revolutionary War heritage to the next level. And so I really wanted to thank Janice for putting us on that footing so that we can take this next leap in our life as an organization and make our contribution to the state. And she's been invaluable in doing that. And so we'll have more news as we go forward. We'll be launching a search for this position. We'll have other positions as well with this new model that we're looking at that we need to move forward. And we look forward to working with Janice over the next few months as we all make that happen. So again, thank you to Amy. And thank you to Janice. Obviously, we'll be seeing more of you over the next few months. But wanted to express my gratitude now for where we are versus where we were 5 years ago. And I think with that, we're going to bring this meeting to an end. I know some of you had questions about the tours. But feel free to reach out to us about those. If you have an idea of where something is going, I know I quickly showed a color-coded map, and there is an actual video that we have that we did when we introduced the tours that explains that a little better. And so I don't know whether Amy, you have an access to where that YouTube video lives. So people can get a better sense of what the network of tours is designed to do, but it is designed to introduce folks to the revolution throughout the entire state, and that's something that we've been able to set up over the past few years. And again, thanks to Janice and her team, we are in a position to really burst out onto the scene over the next couple of years with these things. All right, thank you all for attending, and we hope that continue pushing forward. We'll be sending out a notice, I think, on what we can do for the next steps, particularly with getting the state to pony up what it needs to do to put us in the right position so that we can take full advantage of 2026 and the surrounding commemoration. And we'll just keep plugging forward again. So thank you very much, and everybody have a very good day.